Hey everyone, welcome to the On the Record podcast. This week, my guest is KYMA anchor and MMJ, Mr. Luis Lopez. Luis, welcome to the show.
Devin, thanks for having me, man. I'm looking forward to it. I'm a big fan of the show. I've listened to a good amount of the episodes, and dude, I love the work, man. It's great. So I'm happy to actually be a guest this time.
Yeah, it's exciting. It's exciting. Glad to have you here. Now, you and I were kind of in similar spheres, right? We're fresh out of college. We're right in the thick of things with the journalism business. You're a lot of people I think are going through what we're going through right now, which is like working in the business right out of college. And each of us, we all have different stories and perspectives to kind of go behind it. But to kind of give listeners a little bit of context, right? How did you sort of get this job at KYMA?
It was kind of a long, spread out process for me, sort of. So basically, KYMA is in this town called Yuma, Arizona, for those who haven't heard of it, because I know I hadn't heard of it before I had, been told about the job. So that's definitely one aspect of it. But so last year in my last semester at San Diego State, I was with the GOAT himself, Jerry McCormick. I took his class, and he was really good about bringing in a ton of guest speakers for us, and trying to get us to network with people who could potentially get us a job post grad. And one of the people he brought in was my current boss, the news director here at KYMA, Ernesto Romero. And when he came to guest speak, he had said there's going to be, some newsroom jobs available this summer. If anyone's interested, if you'd like to apply, definitely reach out to me, we can talk about it. And initially, I hadn't really thought much of it. Obviously, we're looking for jobs post grad, but, I was just kind of like, okay, cool. I'll keep it in the back of my head. And then a couple of weeks later, Jerry had actually called me and said, hey, I just want you to know, I really think you should go for that job in Yuma. I think it would be good for you. And I think it'd be a really solid stepping stone to eventually get to where you want to go. And I was like, all right, cool. If that's what you think I should do, then I'm gonna take your advice. Cause as we all know, Jerry's advice is golden. So we if he says jump, you say how high. And eventually I ended up calling my then he wasn't my news director, but I had emailed my news director now. And I told him hey, I was in Jerry McCormick's class. I'd be interested in that job that you have open this summer. So, if it's something we could just talk about, it doesn't have to be a full interview or anything, but if I could just ask you some questions about it, I'd love to chat with you for a little bit. And he was like, yeah, I'd be more than happy to. So I ended up having a phone call with him, and we talked for a while just about different aspects of the job, what it would look like. And I was like, okay, well, yeah, I really appreciate the information. He was like, yeah, thanks for reaching out to me. Definitely when it gets closer to summer, contact me again and we'll talk about, what we can do for you. I was like, okay, sounds good. So then a few months went by, and then sure enough, Jerry was like, hey, have you reached back out to him yet? And I was like, no, not yet. And he was like, you should probably do that. And I was like, okay. So I reached back out to my news director, and I was like, hey, if you guys are still hiring, I would definitely still be interested. So if that's something that, we can talk about again, I'd love to. And he was like, well, I'll tell you what, we'll just give you an interview. So a week from now, we'll get the Zoom set up, and, we'll be good to go. And I was like, oh, okay, for sure. So,
wow.
Yeah. Just like that, he gave me an interview. So sure enough, a week later we did the interview. I was pretty happy with the way it went. I thought it went good. But even just because of a good interview doesn't mean you're going to necessarily get the job. So then a week after that, though, I was out with my friends, and then sure enough, I get a call from him, and he's like, okay, well, we just wanted to let you know that we're going to go ahead and offer you the job. We're looking forward to potentially having you if you take it. Sure enough, I did take it. So that's pretty much the timeline of how I got this job and how I'm here.
Did you have any hesitancy at first? Because obviously, obviously you moved from your hometown in the Bay Area to San Diego. So you kind of had that experience of moving before, but now you're moving from here in San Diego to going from this random place in Yuma that you never even been to before. And did you ever have any hesitancy at first before making the move, or were you like, this is it, I'm going to take it, I have to take it?
I think it was kind of both, because part of me knew obviously this is a full-on MMJ job. I'll be working at a news station. This is not an internship. This isn't a part-time position. This is full-on, I am a straight up reporter. I am going to be on TV 5 days a week giving out different stories. So I knew how big of an opportunity it was. And obviously I couldn't pass that up. But at the same time, that honestly was not necessarily like I don't want to say it wasn't my plan, but it's definitely, I wasn't expecting to get an opportunity like that so soon out of college, just because I had seen so many of my friends and, fellow students at SDSU, kind of struggle to find something immediately after post grad. So initially I had thought like, okay, I'll probably, move back home and then just, try and look for a job for a while, however long that takes. And, it is what it is. But when he eventually offered me the job, I was just like, oh man, all right, I guess that's it. We're just going full send from San Diego straight to Yuma, and then we're just going to jump right into it. So yeah, I wouldn't say I was ever hesitant, because again, I knew how big the opportunity was, and that at the end of the day, you have to take something like that. But it was definitely like, wow, okay. I guess it was just, I guess I could say I was just a little surprised that I was able to find something that soon. I'm thankful that I was.
Mm-hmm. And I know a lot of people talk, you mentioned before that your friends were struggling with post-grad. I mean, for me, I kind of had that same sort of boat where like I was at NBC and then I was kind of in this sort of situation where I wasn't full-time yet, but I was still part-time. So it was like, you're in that sort of dichotomy between you're kind of secure, but not really, because they don't really have you full-time yet. So I get that feeling. I understand that feeling of like, you want something so bad right away, because it's like college, you're kind of pressured to sort of do something right away. Grad school may not be an option for some people. And so I get that. But now, first, you get, as with a lot of news jobs, you have training your first 1 or 2 weeks on the job. And then immediately right after that, they just throw you to the fire pit and see if you see if you sink or swim. For you, what was your sort of feeling and experience in that first week, like after training, and you just get thrown into it? And like, yeah,
you said it, man. They throw you in the fire. I mean, I'll never forget. I don't think I have ever been more stressed out in my life than I was that first like couple weeks of the job, because I had gone in on my first day, and on the very first day, you go in and you talk to HR first, and you're, doing all the paperwork and just a little like requirements that you have to do. And I'm like, okay, it's all part of it. Fine. And then once I was done with all that, then my boss is like, okay, we're going to bring you in for a little like intro one-on-one. We'll kind of break down what your daily responsibilities look like and, kind of how you get things done. And then we'll send you out with a reporter, and you can like shadow them, and they'll kind of give you a breakdown of what their day looks like. Maybe, you'll like to do things a little different, but either way, you'll shadow them, get a feel for it. So I go into the one-on-one with my boss, and he's like, all right, yeah, hey, welcome to the team. Like, we're happy to have you. Like, let's go ahead and just talk about, what your daily routine is going to look like. Basically, we want you to have a VOSOP for our 4 o'clock show, a mini package for our 6 o'clock, and a full package for our 10 o'clock show. And at first, when I hear that, I don't really know what the daily routine looks like. I've never been in a professional newsroom environment like that. So in my mind, I'm like, you guys want 3 like stories out of me a day? Like what? That's a little crazy. And then he's like, well, no. It would all be the same story. It's just different versions of it for each show. And then I'm like, okay, all right. I guess that makes a little more sense. Stress level a little bit down. I was like, okay, great. Well, how do you guys get people's stories? Do you guys have like an assignment desk, or, who should I talk to? And then my boss was just like, oh, no, that's on you. Like, you gotta, we don't have an assignment desk here. And then he kind of laughed. I was like, oh, okay. All right. I guess that is how it is. And then obviously after that, I'm like, wow, so I'm in charge of finding my own stories every day, my own interviews, my own shots, my own look lives, my own everything. And from that point on, I was just like, oh man, what did I just get myself into? Am I even really like cut out for this? Like at the Daily Aztec, I mean, we were turning stories maybe like, every like couple weeks.
Yeah.
And the stuff would just kind of be like, oh, hey, this is going on. Maybe it might work as like a package. It might be kind of cool. And be like, okay, you can kind of take your time with it. But now I'm going from that more like relaxed, more of like, learning environment to now like, we expect this out of you every single day. And if you miss it, then obviously it's not going to be good. So, that was really stressful going through that. And then obviously like my first week of training, I'm just kind of seeing what these reporters do every day. And I'm like, man, how am I going to do that? That looks insane, trying to meet deadline all the time, focusing on shots, getting all your interviews set up. Sometimes obviously things don't work out. That's just, the nature of the business. Some days, you're trying to reach out for calls and it's just not necessarily working out. And then, that first week finishes, I'm done with training. And now boom, on Wednesday, they're expecting my first story idea. And I think I ended up doing something about like the Suns happened to be playing in the finals. So I was like, maybe we could do something on like local bars, like talk to fans about what it feels like to watch games here again. Cause you know, it was still like post COVID. Well, we're not post COVID. We're still very much in the thick of it, but you know, fans are able to, you know, watch games from bars and stuff again. So I was like, okay, well, I don't know. I guess I could do a story on that. And that took me like way longer than it should have probably, but I ended up getting it done. I think I missed like one of the deadlines that day, but you know, it was my first day. So luckily my boss was a little more lenient. And then the next day I had to do it over again. I think I did like a dog shelter story, and eventually I got the hang of things. You know, it was tough, you know, definitely very stressful when I first got started. And it's still stressful now in ways, but definitely not as stressful again as like those first few weeks, because, you know, I've gotten more used to it, and I think I've adjusted, and I do think I've gotten a little better with things. But yeah, it was definitely a very hectic experience getting started here.
What's your process like when you're having to, you know, when you hear your boss say that we don't have an assignment desk, you have to find your own stories. Like, you know, I can kind of imagine like that first day, you know, you're new and you're young, you just got thrown into this, and you're having sort of a brain cramp because you're trying to figure out what should I talk about? I mean, now, how do you sort of go about finding different stories? Is it just more so about going back to those connections that you have with certain people in the community in the area?
There's definitely that aspect. I mean, I'm always, you know, running through our emails too, looking for different like press releases about, you know, what's going on in the area. There's usually local organizations that are putting something out saying like, hey, you know, we just started working on this, and now, you know, I'll take a look at that and I'll be like, okay, cool. How can I turn that into a package? Who can I talk to for this? Is it something that is a viable day turn, basically? So, you know, there's always that. Sometimes people will reach out to me and be like, hey, you know, this is going on. I think this might make kind of a cool story. And, you know, as with everything, I have to pitch it to my boss. So, you know, when I do think of a story idea, then I send the email to him hoping like, okay, hopefully he approves this, because this is all I got for right now. Fingers crossed. Yeah. But, you know, that's kind of my process of finding stories. I mean, I've also found stuff on Facebook. Facebook has been good too. You know, sometimes there's just different little events going on, or, you know, something, you know, that you might be able to find that maybe someone else didn't necessarily think of turning into a story, or there's just someone you see that's doing something in the community that you think should be highlighted. The other day I found a guy who was offering to paint portraits of people who have passed away from COVID, and he's doing it for free and just giving it to the families of loved ones. So
oh, wow.
That's an example of like one story that I just happened to, you know, find, and I just published it this past weekend. So yeah, that's kind of my process for finding stories, but, you know, I'll take them any way I can get them. Honestly, you know, having to find one every day is like, you'll get desperate sometimes, you'll do what you got to do, but, you know, I make it work.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and, you know, a lot of people who are athletes, they talk about this, like having the welcome to the pros moment. For journalists, there's a welcome to journalism moment. What was your moment?
Oh man, my welcome to journalism moment, literally like it was like my second or third week there. Obviously, you know, like I said, you know, my mind's going a mile a minute, just trying to think of story ideas and how to get them done. And one day I was working on my story. It was about like a new high school or something that was opening in the area. I had worked on it all day. I was out trying to find MOS in the neighborhood where they were building a man on street, for those who don't know what that means. But I was trying to, you know, find MOS for that story, you know, just in the neighborhood that it was being built. Took me a while. I had finally found someone who was willing to interview. And then on my way back to the station, I get a call from my boss, and he's like, hey, we got a storm going on over in Welton. It's like a dust storm. They're calling it a microburst storm.
Oh my gosh.
We think there's some really good visuals out there. Kind of a dangerous situation, but you know, we think we're going to send you out there so you can go live for the 10:00 show.
Ooh.
And I'm just like, man, this is only like my third week out here, and they're already sending me out on breaking news. Like, you know,
what time did they tell you?
That was probably like, I want to say like 6:30 or 7 that they told me. And the place that the storm was at was a place that was probably a solid 40 or 50 minutes away from Yuma. So not only was it breaking news, it's breaking news that was going to be like kind of a mini road trip. So I was like, wow, okay. And on top of that, I had only gone live once before that. They had me go live my first week of training because it was something on the, you know, the finals, you know, easy live shot, whatever. But now obviously going to like cover like a storm that's damaging homes and like putting people in shelters is like, okay, that's obviously a much different live shot. Like there's more information that needs to be conveyed. And, you know, it's a scary situation. And on top of that, I had never used one of our little live view units before, which is these little like backpacks that you attach to your camera to go live. Exactly. Yeah. So I had never used that before. I had no clue on how to use it. But as soon as I get back to the station, they're like, all right, here's the little backpack. Here's the cable you plug into. Here's what you have to turn on. Here's a little setting you have to turn on. Basically, as soon as you get there, just do that. We'll connect. You got to go ahead and give us a call, and then we'll, make sure that your picture and audio and everything looks okay. And yeah, so you'll have to do that. And I was like, well, okay, sounds good. So I get in my car and I'm like, I put in Google like where to go, because I'd only been to this place like one other time. Thankfully, I went there the week before for like training, because we had a much like lighter like story about water or something out there. But sure enough, I got on the freeway. I'm driving out there and I'm trying to like keep myself calm, because I'm like, all right, whatever. We're going to go live. We'll try and talk to people. I don't know. Maybe we'll find something, but we'll try and stay safe. And, I'm sure it'll be all good. And I had the radio on in the car. And then sure enough, like after my mind went through that, the radio just shuts off, and like one of the emergency alert things goes off, and it's like, turn away now, turn away.
Oh my gosh.
Like, oh man, all these other cars are like driving away from the storm, and here I am driving right into the thick of it. And, but it ended up working out. Luckily they sent another reporter out there with me. We went in separate cars because he was out doing something else, but we had one reporter covering it for our NBC station. I was covering it for our CBS station. So thankfully I wasn't completely on my own out there. I did have, some help and, some guidance on kind of what to do, how to handle the situation. But yeah, I mean, for a 2-week-old reporter to be thrown right into a dangerous storm and, having to go live for the show is definitely that was for sure my welcome to journalism moment. That threw me right into the thick of things. And I think that got me caught up with everything right away.
Yeah. Wow. What a story. What a story. I mean, for me, I think, this story happened after I was put on full time, but it was one of those moments where I'm just like, that really reminded me of why I'm in this. And it was like, we had a plane crash into a neighborhood in Santee. And as soon as that happened, like we immediately go to live coverage, wall to wall. We have like 3 reporter crews out there. We're throwing everyone, and like, you got the people at the desk telling me, oh, you need to cut a SOT for a reporter because they can't, they don't have time to do all these things. You have to cut a SOT from the live hit that they had earlier in other shows and for their 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock hit. And so we're just going wall to wall with all this plane crash coverage. And like, as a producer, you're trying to figure out, balance all these reporters and like people always going over on their time for their segments and all these other things. And, it was just a crazy day. And I remember like, I was working a night side shift that night. And for the 11 o'clock show, we brought a crew on for the nuts and bolts of the whole crash. We had somebody do info on the pilot because they just released the pilot's name that night. And then like, we had a special, like an anchor wanted to do a package about like the audio, because we were the only station that night who had the audio from the flight tower of the crash. And so it was like that moment was really sort of my welcome to journalism moment, just because that moment of like big breaking news really got me to understand just how stressful the perspective is, but also how important teamwork is. Because I mean, if you're not on the same page, especially you as a reporter, right, as MMJ, if you're not on the same page as your anchors, as your producers, as your news directors, your managers, I mean, things can go awry really quickly, right?
Oh yeah. Yeah, definitely. It's kind of an interesting thing here. We have one less, bridge of communication to get to because our anchors actually produce their own shows. We don't have like dedicated producers here. So that's, kind of another like interesting aspect of this place. But yeah, I mean, it's the same thing. And I think, the anchors / producers, probably feel it even more when we are not communicating with them or letting them know what's going on with their stories, because at the end of the day, it's their face on TV and people are the ones that see them. So if something goes wrong with their story, people just assume, that it's on them. So, that communication is definitely key, but it's something I try to do every day. I think I've done a decent job of it so far, but you'd have to ask probably my coworkers to, get an accurate review on that. Hopefully I'm doing good, but that's something I definitely try for because, it is required at the end of the day. There's shows to put on and, they're spending their entire shift trying to get those shows ready. So, the more communication you have, the better.
Yeah. And I mean, like for you, I mean, you've anchored before. I mean, obviously you just mentioned that anchors also produce their shows. So I'm assuming that you must have had a chance at producing some shows too. I mean, what kind of goes through your head in that dynamic? Because you're sort of having to switch switch into a different lane, right? Because you're not reporting, you're not having to, get your 3 basic facts and do your look lives, whatever. You're having to anchor in a whole show, produce all these different segments for your different blocks, find content, get sound, all that stuff. What sort of goes in through your head at that moment?
Yeah, producing's been an interesting experience. That was something I really had no prior experience with before I got here. Cause, like I said, I would turn stories for the Daily Aztec and all that, but producing was something that I literally had never even given a second thought to. But sure enough, I think like 3 months into it, my boss was like, hey, we want you to anchor one of the weekend shows. So that way you can get an idea of how to do it in case we need you to fill in the future. So, I did it, got through it. And sure enough, since then I've anchored plenty of times. I just anchored yesterday on, I got called in because one of our anchors called out sick. So my boss was like, yeah, we need you to come in if you can, but cause you're pretty much our only option. So, come in and, do that for us. We'd really appreciate it. So, it's definitely something I'm a lot more used to now, but yeah, when I'm going through producing, I mean, it's kind of cool. Cause now, it's completely my show and there's, I can figure out what I want to put first and obviously all that. And I think the best, I don't know, I guess the most fun part about it is that, I can kind of control what goes on there. And I don't know, like you said, looking for different sound and all that. I mean, luckily we have, a lot of really good reporters here. So they're out, getting what they need and I can determine like where to put it. But yeah, I mean, I don't know, I guess, I'm still learning how to be a producer, to be honest. So, I mean, still trying to get those habits right and everything, but, it's something that I've, actually kind of grown to like in my time here. It's definitely not something I was interested in before, like I said, but now it's something I'm kind of enjoying. Anchoring the shows is cool, but, yeah, as long as I'm getting like the most important information out there to the viewer first, I mean, that's, that's the goal at the end of the day. So yeah, definitely like it.
So I'm assuming you guys probably stack your shows, right? Do you end up writing all of the scripts for it and editing all the video that goes for it? Or do you have designated people who do those sorts of things?
Luckily, so our directors will pull from, a lot of the stuff we're taking is from national wires. If it's not from local reporters, obviously that's, typically the way it goes. So thankfully, yeah, we do have directors who, and they're also operating the board and stuff during the shows, obviously. But before that, their job is to, let's say I see like a national package from, CNN and I'm like, hey, like I want this in the show. So I'll create like a little placeholder for them. And they're the ones who pull it, thankfully. And then, sometimes if we get breaking news that comes in and a reporter is able to get video of it, but they don't have time to edit it, they'll send it to, our directors and they'll cut a little VO for us and, we'll try to get it in the show. So yeah, that's kind of the process there. And, they make my job a little bit easier, but, thankfully, we have that, kind of team in place, even though we don't necessarily have as much resources, maybe a bigger market would have.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Now, I know you work night side shift in a small market, and obviously that is like a dynamic in itself, working a night shift. I mean, what has it been like for you working night side and just having, those 10 p.m. newscasts when you're late and having to file a web story, all that sort of thing? How's that dynamic sort of been?
Not as bad as I initially thought. That was another one of the things that I was, kind of maybe not stressing over, but I was like, oh man, am I really gonna have to be here till like 10 p.m. every night? Like, I get that that's the way it is. But that's not how we do things around here necessarily for the reporters. So, as long as I'm, meeting all my deadlines, I can turn in my stuff whenever. And as long as I've turned everything in for the day, I mean, I'm allowed to go home. Obviously, if some type of like breaking news happens, then, I'll come back and, I'll go cover that. Thankfully, that's not like an everyday thing, but, on most days, I'll get up and I'll look for my interviews. I try to get up around like 7 or 8 every day, start making calls for, whatever story I'm doing. I'll try to get my interviews set up by like 12 if I can. And then I start writing the VOSOT. And once I'm done with that, and once that script is clear, then I'll write my mini. And once my mini is done, I'll be able to shoot my look lives, maybe get some more B-roll. And then I'll go back and then I'll, add a little bit onto it for the package. And once the package is done, then I'll write the web article for the day. And then once I'm done with all that, then, I'm done for the day. I'll have to probably, upload my package to YouTube after 10, when it airs. So I'll do that. But, on most days, hopefully I'm able to get done by like 6:37, some days earlier, depending on how things work out. That's always the goal, to get stuff done as quick as possible. But, every day is different too. I mean, some days sources aren't getting back to me right away. They can only interview like closer to deadlines. So I'll have to have like an interview maybe at like 2:30 and then turn a vote out for the 4, or sometimes someone will only be able to interview not till like 5 and I have to put it in for my mini package at 6. So, every day is different. Unfortunately, there's no like set schedule, but, again, it's kind of like just the nature of the industry. You're working with what you got, and, hopefully it ends up with you meeting all your deadlines and you turning a good story. So that's kind of what my day looks like. Again, thankfully I don't have to stay, at the station until 10 every day, but you do have to be, you got to keep your head up because, like you said, there could be some type of like breaking news or anything like that. So but that's pretty much my routine.
Now, a lot of people have different ways that they sort of structure their packages based off of the story. And now each story you get each day is different. I mean, and every package that you're going to make is going to end up being different. But do you sort of have a formula for which you go about shooting and editing and writing all of your stuff?
I think it kind of depends. I mean, a lot of my stuff ends up being more hard news. So at that point, I'm just trying to like, you kind of treat it the same way you treat producing. It's like, okay, what's the most important information? What do I need to put out first? And then from there, you just kind of like elaborate on it, or you let your sources elaborate on it. So, I'll kind of put up like maybe like some numbers or something for people to look at or think about. I mean, a lot of the stuff we're doing for example, is with COVID. So I'll say like, oh, COVID numbers have been going up, this much recently, or this much, or, vaccinations have been going up this much, or they've been going down recently or something like that. And then, I'll be talking to a source. So, for COVID example, it could be, maybe a doctor, or maybe I'm just going out and getting MOS and asking people like, hey, are you worried about COVID? Have you been vaccinated? I don't know, things like that for those type of stories where, I'm just kind of presenting a chunk of information and letting someone give their feedback or reaction to it, or, elaborating on it. And I think that's probably a process I'm still trying to evolve right now. I mean, I just hit like my 6-month mark here. So I feel like, as time passes, I'm just going to be getting, hopefully, a little better with that stuff, kind of developing some, even better formulas for stories and trying to get, different like formats and stuff working out. But yeah, that's kind of how I go right now, just keep it to the basic, who, what, when, where, all that fun stuff. So, as long as I'm getting the most important information out first, that's kind of the formula I like to follow right now.
Cool. And have you gained any new perspective on anything in the journalism business since you've been working in a small market for 6 months?
Oh man, it's kind of a tough question. I mean, new perspectives. I mean, I'd say the biggest thing is just kind of gaining an appreciation for the people that are talking to you and willing to like, give their feedback and things like that. Because, it's one thing to find the story ideas, but when you find people that are willing to, share their experiences with you and, kind of getting their feedback on it, that's definitely a new like appreciation I've gained for the industry and kind of just the job as a whole is, getting to talk to someone new every day and, finding people that are willing to kind of share their experiences and stuff with you.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, for me, what I would say has kind of changed my perspective ever since I've been at NBC has just been like the importance of teamwork, because you can do so much yourself, but you have to be reliant and trustworthy upon others in order to get what you need done. And I think that's the biggest thing. And it's like going back to what I said before is everything's a collaborative business, and it sort of relies on having to get others to do it to come through on their end in order for you to deliver. So I think for me, teamwork and collaboration has sort of been like the biggest thing that I've learned is just appreciating that sort of thing, because I'm just surrounded by so many, amazing people, and that helps me end up reaching to what I am. And same would probably go for you too, right? Is that you're surrounded by so many great people to work with that ends up helping everybody as a whole. So I know that you want to end up pursuing sports down the road, but you've had some time in news quite a bit. You've done a lot of hard news stories. Have you gained a little bit more appreciation for news reporting than you would have had before? Because I know you were doing a lot of sports and sort of limiting yourself exclusively to sports back in college. But now that you've done a lot of news for the past 6 months, have you sort of gained a different appreciation for it in a different sense?
Yeah, definitely. It's kind of a different grind because, with sports, obviously, yeah, your job is to inform people about, what went down. But, sports to me is more of like, kind of a fun environment. Like, all right, how can I make this cool? How can I make this, more entertaining for the viewer? And, it's more of like entertainment focused at the end of the day. But with news, I mean, while yes, you are trying to like, hook the viewer and grab their attention, it's more so about like, okay, what's important about the story and why does it matter to the community? So to be able to give that information to people is definitely, kind of a cool experience. And it's something that honestly, I didn't even really think I could do before I got here. And, now having done it for 6 months at this point, I'm going to do it again for another year and a half. It's definitely something I've gained an appreciation for.
Mm-hmm. And like, have you had any favorite stories that you've done so far? Just looking back on your 6 months here in Yuma, have you had any favorite stories?
I'd say that, that one I just got to do about the local artist who was painting, pictures of loved ones who have, been lost due to COVID. That was definitely a cool story. He had a lot to say about that. I got to do a story a few weeks ago that was kind of fun to get feedback on. The Powerball jackpot was at like $500 million. So I was just going up to different people and asking them like, hey, like, what would you do if you won $500 million? And people were giving me some interesting answers like, oh yeah, I'd give it to charity. Or one guy was like, oh dude, I'd take off to Mexico, like all this different stuff. Wow. So that was fun to get people's feedback on that. But yeah, man, those are probably two of the things that stick out to me right now that just come to mind. But, every day I've gotten to do something, kind of cool. I mean, some days are better than others, but overall, it's been a good time.
Yeah. Yeah. And now I want to change a little bit of topics to another thing that's been trending in the journalism world on Twitter over the past few weeks has been, I don't know if you've seen this, but MJ Tori Yorge of WSAZ, she was doing a live shot for her newscast and she ended up getting hit by a car during her live shot. Obviously it went viral on Twitter and there have been a lot of people in the journalism business, reporters, producers, anchors, just, giving their thoughts, giving their reaction, giving their feedback. I don't know if you've seen the video or not, but like, what's your sort of reaction to it?
I have seen that video. Yeah. I saw it the day it came out and yeah, initially it was just like, oh, wow, that just kind of, but my initial mindset is like, wow, that is kind of just what journalists go through all the time. We can sit here and talk about like, well, they should have done this, they should have done that. But unfortunately, that's like the reality. There's reporters like her out there on their own with live views. Like I said earlier, just, they'll send them out there just to get, the shots or whatever. And sometimes maybe it's not necessarily for situations where they really need someone to be out there. I think that's something that the industry probably has to improve on. I think we have to understand that not everything requires a live shot. Sometimes it is okay to just kind of let people know about what's going on with the situation and finding different ways to, convey important things to people like that. But that is just kind of the reality of the industry. And I think, unfortunately, the fact that it resulted in, her getting hit by a car for people to see it is sad, but, hopefully it, helps change things going forward because now it's kind of blown up. And like you said, it's become a topic of conversation. So hopefully with that conversation, things begin to improve in the industry.
Yeah. And one thing that really kind of brought my attention to it was like the idea of safety, right? Because if you're MMJ, you're out there alone at night doing a live shot. And it just made me think about what Joe Little used to say was check your six, right? Because you want to check around you because you never know who's going to be doing what. And obviously, she was doing a live shot, so she may not have had a chance to do that. But again, I think it sort of falls back on, the idea that if you can get a photog or somebody to sort of be there with her, right? Even if it's just another reporter, like in your sense, I think it helps because it's like, then that situation can kind of be sort of preventable, whether that means moving her live shot to a different area in that same location, or maybe moving her down in the show so that, those sort of things don't happen. But I definitely think that there's a lot of things, like you said, that we can learn from it, even for people in journalism industry in, working for news stations that don't have that sort of policy in place, right? Let's say they may have the resources to have photogs with MMJs for live shots, whatever. But I think it kind of goes back to the point that safety for MMJs, especially in smaller markets, is so important, right? Because it's like, you never know what's going to happen on any certain day. Cause like you said, it's so different. And I think what also really intrigued me about it, just as a producer sense, was like, they go through a live shot. She gets hit by the car. and the live shot keeps running. Like they keep staying on her, and she ends up finishing her live shot. And I'm just like, as a producer, me, it was like, man, I don't know what the producers or the directors in the booth are doing, because it's like, why are they not, moving on to a different segment in the show, or like changing away from the live shot? I mean, and I've heard that the anchor couldn't see the feed, which is why he ended up not having a reaction to it, which is understandable. I mean, I understand that, but I just don't understand why, the people in the booth, the directors or the producers, just didn't switch. I don't know. It just boggles my mind. But yeah, like you said, it's just there's a lot of different conversations that need to be had, especially after watching a video like this. Would you agree?
Oh yeah, 100%. And like I said, hopefully those conversations lead to bigger changes within newsrooms, and hopefully it leads, news companies and stuff to, start, spending a little bit more money, hiring some more photogs. So that way things like that don't happen. And, reporters can be more safe out there, because at the end of the day, that should be everyone's top priority, is making sure that, we're reporting the news and not being the news. Right. So
yeah, definitely. I mean, and it's just like, it's crazy. I remember watching it, and I was talking to my coworkers the day after, and we all were like, man, it just could have been so preventable. But I wanted to talk a little bit about editing, because you and me both do that quite often. I mean, you're an MJ, you edit and shoot your own stuff. I edit quite a lot for the shows when I'm at work 5 days a week. Do you use Premiere to edit a lot of your stuff?
Yeah, so they give us Premiere here, and thank God, because I'm sure I would have been able to pick up another system fairly quickly, because I'm so familiar with Premiere, and I'm sure a different system wouldn't have been too bad to learn. But thankfully it was nice getting something that I'm already familiar with and already had experience with. So yeah, that's what we use every day.
What has it been like to edit on a time crunch? Because I know some photogs that we have kind of go through this thing where they get sent the track at like 30 minutes before that package hits in the show or something like that. I don't know if you have the same sort of dilemma, because you kind of told me that you like to get your stuff done early. But what's it sort of like when you have to, track all your stuff, log your sound bites, and get all your video and put it in the right places? And what's that sort of like doing that in the time crunch for your shows?
Oh man. Yeah. See, that's why I like to get my stuff done early. If I was doing that 30 minutes before the show, like my anchor producers would all probably kill me, because they would hate that I'm getting my stuff in that close to deadline. But typically, I mean, what I like to do is when I'm going out and shooting, I like to go out and just get as much shots as I can. Even like when I'm done with the shoot, there's probably a ton of stuff that will never even see the light of day again. But I like to at least give myself that option and, just have as much stuff as possible. And then, once I get all my shots, and I'll go back and I'll track my package, get the audio up on there. And then, I'll place the audio there, and then I'll start listening to it again and deciding like, okay, I think this shot would go best over this line. And then, maybe I could do a little like zoom in effect here, like add text here, maybe something like that. A lot of the time those little zoom effects and text effects aren't something I get to do, because again, I'm on a time crunch, and at the end of the day, I just want to make deadline. I don't want to cut it close to the show, especially because, technical difficulties can happen. Sometimes your package isn't uploading right. The sound could be off or something like that. So I like to allow time for that as well. So that way, producers can count on me for that, time in their show, and it's not something they have to worry about. But that also goes back to kind of, trying to get things done early, so I can put in, extra little stuff like that, makes the package pop a little bit more. But yeah, typically my process is, again, go out, get as much stuff as possible, and then give myself as many options as possible when I'm editing everything. And hopefully I can get through that process pretty quickly by, again, giving myself those options.
Now, I know there's a lot of journalists who maybe are still in college or trying to find a job in the small market. What advice do you have for them to sort of be successful right out of the gate?
Oh man, I would say, probably trying to just build up your reel as best as possible. That's the thing that's going to grab news directors' attention in terms of, trying to get you a job, and, something they'll be able to go off of and be like, okay, well, they're doing this well in their reel, so they can do that for us. Hopefully they can even grow, maybe even get better. And, one of the best ways to improve your reel is by just asking people for feedback. Like, hey, do you like this? Do you not like this? And whether that's coming from mentors, or in my case, it came from a professor. Again, shout out Jerry. He looked at my reel and took a look at it, gave me some critiques, told me what I should do, what I shouldn't do, and where I should put my packages, where I should put my stand-ups, different things like that. So focusing on your reel is definitely one way to do it. And, another way to try and get that like kind of first big job right out of the gate, like I did, is just actually reaching out to news directors. Because, I think when I was first considering how I would try and find my first job post-grad, I was just kind of looking for listings and seeing who was hiring, and then, going through the usual process of like filling out an application and then hoping they notice it. But I think the best way for people to actually get a job, or at least get interviews, is to actually reach out to those news directors directly, because right off the bat, that's one way where they can see like, okay, this person actually took the time to contact me and let me know who they are. And now, you're probably a little more at the forefront of their mind than someone who just sent in their resume.
Yeah. And I mean, I can't attest to that enough. I mean, one of the things that sort of helped me land my gig with NBC right now is like Professor Jerry McCormick reached out to me via message saying, oh, there's a possible opening at NBC. Like, I think you're a really good writer. I think it kind of work for you. I mean, it would just be kind of like a writing editing gig. He didn't give me much information outside of that, but he was like, email Greg Dawson, who happened to speak to our class a couple weeks before that. So I emailed Greg, didn't hear back from him for like a week or 2 weeks, emailed him again, because I was just like, I better at least keep doing it, because, maybe I'll get an answer or something or hear back. And then I get an answer and he's like, we may not have any openings right now, but I'll forward your name to the people who are in the hiring for those positions. And then we'll go from there and just see what happens. Couple weeks passed by, and then the EPs, the executive producers at NBC, ended up coming back to me saying, hey, we're introducing themselves and said that they had this part-time opening for me. And I ended up just applying. I think it was like me and actually Kyle who ended up applying too. I remember I applied, did like a little writing test, and then they were like, did some interviews, and then I get a call like a day or two later, like, yeah, we want to hire you. And I was like, oh, I mean, cause it's like, if that's your first big opportunity, you got to take it. Right. I mean, you kind of would be foolish for you to not do it. And I've just taken it and kind of rode with it. And now I am at the stage where I'm full-time. I'm the lead editor for all the shows. And, now I'm at a point where my name's in the list for Emmy noms. So, which is exciting. I mean, it's exciting stuff to get a chance at cracking one, and I've only been in the business for like a year or two, which is pretty insane.
Yeah. Congrats, man. That's awesome.
Yeah, it's just crazy. But I totally like, to get back to on your point though, is like, reaching out to news directors, that's like so critical. And I think a lot of people are not willing to sort of make that step, or they may be hesitant or scared because they're like, they just don't know if it's going to, that fear of the unknown, of not knowing where that's going to take them. And I would say just do it, because it's like, if you don't do it, I mean, you're never going to get an answer to where you're going, right? These news directors, they don't have a chance to check every single application. They just scroll through the reels and the names and the resumes, and they don't like it, then bye-bye. They're cutting you out. So you have to make yourself different. And I say that would be my piece of advice. And again, like you said, getting feedback on reels, that's important too. And I think definitely just making your own content, right? Even if it's like what I'm doing right now is podcasting, right? If you're making, this could end up being on your reel. This is just content that people are going to want to see. And it's going to be important for companies when they're hiring you to see you doing a lot of different things, not just reporting, but also, writing, producing, all these other things. And all of it will end up overlapping, because hard work, if you put in the hard work, you'll end up getting all the benefits from it. So now I wanted to transition a little bit into football, because, as you've mentioned before, you're a Raiders fan. They made the playoffs, they lost to the Bengals, but I mean, boy, this past weekend might have been one of the greatest divisional round weekends in NFL history. I mean, all games pretty much went down to the wire. We had, I think, 3 or 4 game-winning field goals. We had one game go to overtime. What's been your reactions to the playoff games of the past weekend? Just main takeaways.
Man, I think one of my initial reactions, man, the future of this league is in such good hands because, 3 out of the 4 quarterbacks that we saw this weekend are super young. I mean, you look at Josh Allen, you look at Pat Mahomes, you look at Joe Burrow, and just the performances that they've put up so far this postseason. And just you start to get excited. It's like, man, how much longer are they going to be able to do this? Because, especially looking at the Chiefs Bills performance, like that game went so back and forth. Each team had just about as much a chance as winning as the other. And the fact that it came down to the wire in just an absolute instant classic fashion is just absolutely insane. So, it just makes me excited. Like, how many more weekends like that are we going to get? Because I don't think that those are the only quality games we're going to see. And I think we're going to see plenty more of that action this weekend in the championship round.
Yeah. I mean, to go back on your point, the youth in this league is like insane because Josh Allen, I don't know how old he is, but I know he's in his 20s. Same with Patrick Mahomes. I mean, you got so many talented young players who are like, were in college just not 3 years ago. Right. And it's like insane to see how much they've developed and how much talent they bring to the league. I mean, Josh Allen, he's not really surrounded by a lot of like big threat weapons other than Stephon Diggs, but he's like, to see all these teams sort of be able to build complementary talent to their star player to sort of supplement them, I think has been kind of the key thing that all teams have kind of, you've seen with each team, right? The Bengals getting Jamar Chase, the Bills with Stephon Diggs, the Chiefs getting, keeping Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce to complement Mahomes. I mean, I can keep going with all these other teams and it's the same sort of thing. Stafford to the Rams. And what's crazy to me is like, again, like you said, just the talent of the league, but also like how many of these teams were really bad a couple of years ago and how much they've risen. I mean, especially the Niners, right? They were bad last year, a lot of it due to injuries. And now here they are with Deebo Samuel and, Jimmy Garoppolo with an injured throwing thumb, and they're all the way in the NFC Championship game. I mean, same thing with the Bengals, right? Joe Burrow coming off of an ACL tear. And basically, they had a forgetful season. Now here they are in the championship game. I think that's the biggest thing is just seeing so many teams just kind of come in from out of nowhere and chase it.
Yeah, it's absolutely wild. And, just to see the different ways that teams are winning too. I mean, you mentioned the Niners and kind of how Garoppolo has had some struggles this year, even though they've been a really good team. For them to win it completely on special teams points against Aaron Rodgers and the Packers on the road in the freezing cold, it's just another one of those like crazy stories of, teams that have, put in the right pieces and, made the right moves, to get to where they're at. So it's all just kind of like significant and like reflective of that. So it's all been crazy to watch.
Oh, definitely. And hopefully these championship games end up living to the excitement that's going to end up happening. Now, I wanted to preview a couple of these games for you because we have the Bengals and the Chiefs in Kansas City at Arrowhead Stadium. That is going to be an interesting matchup because you have kind of the Bengals riding this hot wave, right? Going from the wild card, beating the Raiders, upsetting the Titans with a field goal late. And now they're sort of facing kind of the giant because the Chiefs have been in the AFC title game for the past, like, I think 3 or 4 years now. They've sort of kind of been like the Golden State Warriors, the Durant Warriors in the NFL. How do you sort of see that game shaking out? Because it's like you sort of have David and Goliath sort of situation happening here.
And, as much as it pains me to say as a Raiders fan, I think the Chiefs are going to end up taking that one because you just saw what Mahomes is able to do. I mean, the fact that he only had 13 seconds left on the clock and was still able to put up a drive that resulted in a field goal for them to send it to overtime is like, how do you stop that? And it's not like the Bills were a like bad defense coming into this. They were a top ranked defense in this league. And he still managed to just completely carve them up and make it look like it was absolutely effortless. And he did it again in overtime on the touchdown winning drive. So, if one of the top ranked defenses in the league wasn't able to stop that, how was a, league average defense in Cincinnati going to be able to stop that? And as much as I would love to see Joe Burrow make a Super Bowl in his second year, as much as I would love to see Jamar Chase make a Super Bowl in his rookie year, I just think the Chiefs are just way too much to overcome right now. And I get that that's kind of what we said the past few years, and it's almost like cliche at this point. But, unfortunately, you got to go with the Chiefs. They're just they seem like the juggernaut right now, and rightfully so.
Yeah, I think, like you said, I think it's going to be an interesting matchup because the Bengals have a really good cornerback in Jesse Bates, but he's matching up against probably one of the best offensive corps in the league. You got Kelce, and then you also have Tyreek Hill and McCole Hardman. and Robinson too. I mean, you have a lot of really dynamic receivers, and I think it's going to be a really interesting showcase offensively because you have two kind of offenses that really love to throw the ball deep. Burrow loves to throw deep to Chase. You got Uzama too down there in Cincinnati, and you have these two offenses that are almost very similar in terms of having a lot of talent on the field, but the defenses on both teams aren't necessarily, up to par in terms of having the best defenses. I think it's going to be more so about which defense is going to be able to make a stop rather than what offense is going to be more explosive, because both of these teams can put up points.
Yeah. And then, given the offensive line performance of the Bengals last week against the Titans, I mean, 9 sacks allowed is like, even the Chiefs and, like you mentioned, they're not necessarily a top defensive unit, but they're still a decent one, somewhat quality. So, I mean, if the Titans were able to get 9 sacks, then, if the Bengals offensive line has a repeat performance like that, it's going to be really tough for Joe Burrow to make plays. And, you need him to make plays because you're going to need him to match up with Mahomes, who's going to make those plays for sure. It's not a question of if, it's a matter of when. So, if the O-line puts up a performance like that, the Chiefs are going to run away with this thing.
Yep, definitely. And now I want to preview the other game too. We have the Los Angeles Rams taking on the San Francisco 49ers at SoFi Stadium in Los Angeles. I mean, this is an exciting game. If you remember, I mean, these two teams played not just 2 weeks ago, I think, and it was a super close to the wire game. And I kind of expect a similar situation here. You have two teams who have really dynamic players. I mean, Cooper Kupp is having one of the most biggest career years ever for a wide receiver in the league right now. And then you have Deebo Samuel putting up insane numbers. He's almost like a running back, but not really, because he kind of runs like a wide receiver out of a running back formation. And so you have him, and then you have Kittle and all these other guys, and Stafford and Cooper Kupp. And like I mentioned before, and again, a lot of sort of mix of talent. But the Rams defense has kind of really been turning it on as of late. I mean, Aaron Donald, Von Miller, two of the best pass rushers in the league. Yeah, the Niners defense also being really good too, right? How do you sort of see this shaking out?
And this is a tough one to call because, my brain says Rams and my heart says Niners, because the Rams, like you just mentioned, they have so much talent all across the field. You have Odell Beckham, Matthew Stafford on one side of the ball. And then on the other side, you have Aaron Donald and Von Miller and Jalen Ramsey, like you said. But then the Niners, on the other hand, as solid of a team as they have, George Kittle, Deebo Samuel, Elijah Mitchell on one side of the ball. And then you have guys like Fred Warner on the other side. It's just Garoppolo has kind of limited what they're able to do offensively. And while they were able to, put up a great offensive performance to beat them a couple weeks ago in SoFi to make the playoffs, it's like, how trustworthy are you of Garoppolo to be able to repeat that performance, even though he does have those solid weapons around him? So again, I want to say Rams, but something about this Niners team, the fact that they've managed to overcome some bad quarterback play from Jimmy G to be able to win some of these games. I mean, if they were able to do what they just did against the Packers, again, on the road, in Lambeau, in the freezing cold, what kind of performance are they going to get when they're going to SoFi, in a stadium that's probably going to be 90% Niners fans, in their kind of weather? It's West Coast, it's LA, obviously it's not Santa Clara, but it's still, weather won't be a factor for them. So at the end of the day, I'm going to say Niners, even though I do think the Rams might be the better team, and that's really only because of Stafford. But I'm going to go with the Niners. I think they're going to win it in what's probably going to be another close game, similar to how the Niners just beat the Packers, but maybe a little more high scoring. They're definitely going to have to get an offensive touchdown. They're not going to be able to rely on just special teams, but I do think at the end of the day, the Niners are going to take it.
One interesting note that I found from Fox Sports is that 49ers coach Kyle Shanahan has beaten Sean McVay's Rams for the past 6 times when both these teams have met. He's won the past 6 meetings. Now, it's going to be interesting because it's like, again, you have two coaches that are very similar. They came out in the same year to coach their teams. They've matched up 6 times. They've lost, and Kyle Shanahan's had the hand in 6 of those meetings. Now, I definitely think that, again, like you said, it's going to come down to sort of can the Niners make those offensive plays, right? Because you're dealing with Garoppolo, who's kind of been good, but kind of bad in some aspects of the game. And I think it'll be key is if they can find plays from somebody else other than Deebo Samuel on the offensive end, if they can do that, I think the Niners have a good chance of winning because their defense, like you said, has been playing really well at the line of scrimmage. I mean, Eric Armstead, Fred Warner, they've been getting a lot of really big time plays from their defense. The Rams, meanwhile, I think they could win that game if they have a good offensive performance, which they've been doing recently. I mean, you have Beckham there, you have Cooper Kupp. And defensively, I think they're going to have to sort of set the tempo from the beginning because, like you said, the Niners have filled that SoFi Stadium to basically 90% capacity of Niners fans last time out. Now, one interesting note is that I noticed that the Rams have kind of made the tickets limited to only people in Southern California. I mean, what were your thoughts on that? Have you seen that?
I have seen that. I think they lifted that restriction, but still, I mean, the fact that they're doing that is like, come on now, how can you get away with that? You know, it's like at the end of the day, if you're not doing the work to, you know, get the home fan base that you want, then, you know, unfortunately that's the price you're going to have to pay. And, you know, on top of that too, I think, you know, part of the Rams, you know, leaving LA back in the day, moving to St. Louis and then coming back is you're just not going to have that dedicated a fan base yet. You're still going to have to put in, you know, a lot more years of winning, especially in a city like LA, where you have teams like the Lakers and Dodgers, who are just kind of like the staples of that area. Naturally, you know, fans have been, you know, they've jumped ship to other teams. And I think in the LA area, the Niners have just been one of those teams that people have gravitated towards. I don't know whether that's because it's, you know, a team that's had success, you know, over the history of their franchise, or it just happens to be, you know, a West Coast team that they could still root for. There's a solid Niners fan base in LA. So I think even if they kept that geographical restriction in place, I think it still probably would have been mostly Niners fans at the game. But now that they've lifted it, it's for sure going to be a sea of red out there, Levi's Stadium South, basically. So yeah, it should be interesting to see, but I think, you know, the Niners are basically playing another home game here.
Yeah, it'll be really interesting. And like another thing I also thought about was like the logistical turnaround, because SoFi Stadium is going to be hosting the championship game this weekend. And then they have the Super Bowl coming up on February the 13th, which is, again, if you think about it, not a lot of logistical turnaround for a stadium that has to, you know, people have to figure out security perimeters, all these other things. This is a non-NFL, non-game related inquiry that I was really intrigued by. But, you know, again, that sort of turnaround. And then plus, I mean, with COVID, I mean, the Super Bowl could still be relocated. I mean, that's another thing that people aren't talking about, is that it could still be relocated. As of now, it still is expected to happen at SoFi Stadium in Inglewood. Which, by the way, I'm really excited for the halftime show. I don't know if you've heard, but I mean, you got Dr. Dre, Snoop Dogg, Mary J. Blige, Eminem. I mean, Kendrick Lamar. You got so many talented people at the Super Bowl. I mean, and it's rap, West Coast rap, that finally gets its time in the spotlight, right? I mean,
I've been looking forward to this one. This is honestly something I never thought I would see from the NFL. I truly did not ever think that we'd get a pure hip hop halftime show, because I thought the NFL was too scared to put something like that up. Because, you know, you see some of the artists they've decided to pick in the past. I mean, you have The Weeknd last year, and he's fantastic, but, you know, he's a little bit more marketable to a mass audience. You have guys like Bruno Mars, also, you know, Beyonce, you know, Justin Timberlake, guys that are a little bit more, you know, maybe like clean, mass marketable. And then here they are, boom, they're putting Dr. Dre in, Snoop Dogg, Eminem, Kendrick Lamar. I am really looking forward to it. If I could only go to the game for just the halftime show, I would do it. That's how excited I am for this halftime show. It's going to be one of the greatest ever. And I don't care what anyone else says. I know halftime shows are always a, you know, cause for controversy every year. It seems like, you know, it's a 50-50 shot on whether like an individual person likes it or not. But I am really looking forward to this one. I think Dr. Dre, Snoop Dogg, Kendrick, Eminem, Mary J. Blige are all going to put up an all-time performance. I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah. Oh, it's going to be so exciting. I mean, because it's like, you know, the NFL halftime show has always been restricted to pop people, or at least it's felt like that for me over the past few years. It's like they've only done pop artists. I mean, Gaga, Beyonce, Justin Timberlake, Bruno Mars, all these pop artists, Coldplay even. But now it's like they're finally taking a chance dipping into rap. And I think it's the perfect place to do it too, right? Because you're in Inglewood, you're in the West Coast. I mean, you know, you're not too far from LA, and that's Dre's playground. So it's like, you know, it's sort of a perfect match. I mean, I was sort of thinking before they announced the halftime show performers that it was going to be either a rap person. I was thinking either Drake or somebody like Kendrick or some West Coast thing, because it was like, it would almost seem foolish to not do that, right? Because it's back in California for the first time in quite a while.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons I'm excited for it. It's pretty much the first time ever that they've actually taken advantage of the geographic location of the Super Bowl and gotten a artist that's actually reflected that. I mean, a few years ago when the Super Bowl was in Atlanta, I would have loved to see like Outkast or Migos or someone like that who's actually like from the area that could have added that much more.
They did have Big Boy. They did have Big Boy.
Okay, yeah, true. But I mean, Maroon 5 was the headliner, and don't get me wrong, as cool as it was to see Big Boy, I mean, that should have been him and Andre 3000 on that stage exclusively. And if you want to bring Maroon 5 out as this, the side piece, then fine, we can do that. But I think it's awesome that they finally taken advantage of the location that they're in, and to do it in a brand new stadium and SoFi like that. Like I said, I think it's going to be a really great performance. And again, I can't wait to see it. It's going to be one of those performances that I'm going to replay on YouTube probably like a million times throughout the course of my life. Like I've already done with Bruno Mars's in New York, and I've already done with the Weekends and Prince's. So I'm really looking forward to this.
Yeah. Oh, I'm so excited. And I mean, for those who haven't been, but I've never been to SoFi Stadium, but I've seen videos of people touring SoFi Stadium. And I mean, that place is a insane stadium because it's just so new. I mean, it's like $500 million or something like that. It costs so much money to build, and it just looks extraordinary. And I think Dre and everybody else is going to kind of transform it into something insane. So it'll be fun. It'll be definitely be fun to watch. And again, February 13th on my network, NBC. Go watch it, NBC, February 13th. And yeah, I mean, it's just going to be really exciting and a fun. What do you sort of think the Super Bowl is going to end up being? Because again, like we said, we talked about these matchups. Who do you end up seeing playing out in the Super Bowl?
I think it's going to be a rematch of what we got a couple years ago. I think it's going to be Chiefs Niners. And again, I'm picking the Niners solely because I think that they've just had one of those seasons where it just seems like when they need a play to happen, when they need something to go their way, they've gotten it. And the fact that they're basically going to be playing a home game, I think that it just kind of amplifies those kind of things a little bit more. So I think they'll eventually be the one that comes out on top in the NFC Championship. And then in the AFC Championship, I think the Chiefs are just too much to overcome right now. Like I said, they're the juggernaut. They have all the offensive weapons and a defense that I think will at least somewhat to be able to give them a chance. As good as Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase and that Bengals offense have been, I just think the Chiefs are just way too overpowered right now. I don't see anybody stopping them. And then when it eventually comes to that Super Bowl, Niners Chiefs, if my prediction does come true, I think it's probably going to be the Chiefs coming out on top, just like they did a couple years ago. And when they did it a couple years ago, I think, as great as Patrick Mahomes was playing then, I think he's playing even better now. So, credit to the Niners defense and what they've got going over there and some of their offensive weapons. But I think the Chiefs are just too strong right now. And I know we all said that last year too, when the Chiefs took on the Bucs, but unfortunately the GOAT was a little too much to overcome then. I still think it's going to be the Chiefs. Again, it pains me to say as a Raiders fan, but I think the Chiefs are going to eventually walk away with the Lombardi.
Yeah, shockingly, I actually agree with you. I think it's going to end up being a rematch of Chiefs Niners, which funny enough was happened right as COVID was about to rise. And now here we are 2 years into it and we're getting the same matchup again. I think, we're going to end up sort of seeing that same sort of dynamic. It's Chiefs Niners. Like you said, Mahomes is just reaching another level of stratosphere right now. And I think what's crazy is even when he made the Super Bowl the first time, people were talking about how good of a season he had then because he threw 50 touchdowns the season before that. But now he's sort of reached a level where it's like, he may already be a Hall of Famer and we didn't even, and he's not even done. I mean, he's barely getting started, or it seems like he's barely scratching the surface. And I think, like you said, the Chiefs are just touching a stratosphere that I think, we haven't seen in football in quite a while, where they're keeping a lot of their high level talent, but also retooling a lot of different areas, sort of similar to, like you said, similar to Golden State in that aspect of like, they just have so many talented players and a really good coach and a really good fan base. It's like, they're like, if you're not a fan of their team, it kind of gets a little annoying, if you're not a Chiefs fan, like, seeing them win all the time and showing up to the same championship game over and over and over and over. It's like, okay, but I think they're just they're too big to stop. And I just feel like Patrick Mahomes is going to get another one. I mean, he's that good. And unfortunately, unless it's Tom Brady at the door, I just don't see anyone winning. I mean, not even, like I said, if it was either Tom Brady or Aaron Rodgers, but Aaron Rodgers is out and Tom Brady's now out. So I see Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs winning another ring.
Yeah, I was watching SportsCenter the other day, and Ryan Clark of ESPN made a really good point he kind of went back to the NBA in the 90s, and he was like, there was a lot of really good players in the 90s. You had guys like Charles Barkley, John Stockton, but they never won a ring. And it was because this dude played in the league whose name was Michael Jordan. And he basically made the comparison of Patrick Mahomes to Michael Jordan. And again, it pains me to say, but I think he's right. But Mahomes is he's just very clearly at the top of his game. He is the best quarterback in the league. And as great as guys like Josh Allen and Joe Burrow will be, I just think eventually, or not even eventually, this is Pat Mahomes' league. And I think he's just going to keep winning rings because he is on that level. And as long as they have guys like Kelsey and Hill, and I'm sure they'll be able to find someone past them. And as long as they keep Andy Reid, who's been a fantastic coach, I think I saw the other day, he's like the first coach in history to take 2 different franchises to 4 straight conference championships back when he did it with the Eagles in the early 2000s. So they just seem to have all the pieces in place, and Patrick Mahomes is right at the center of it. So I think we're just going to continue to see this year in and year out. And unfortunately, it's going to cost guys like Josh Allen and Joe Burrow, barring, God forbid, some sort of injury season or something else going wrong for the Chiefs. But I think, as long as Pat Mahomes is healthy, this is his league.
Yeah. And it boggles me that they started the season 3-4, because it's like, seeing how dominant they are now, it's like, man, how did they start so poorly? Right. Like, cause it's almost like, I don't know if it was either that the rest of the league caught up to them, or that they more so just adapted and needed time to gel before ending up reaching to where they are. But it's just such an interesting team to watch. It's such a fun team to watch too, because it's like, even if you're not an NFL, not a fan of any team, it's like, you want to see these guys play. Like Patrick Mahomes is a dynamic player. Travis Kelce's a crazy player. Tyreek Hill. I mean, look at his touchdown run. I mean, dude caught it like the 50-yard line, just made a little in cut and zoomed out and threw the peace sign before, and the guy was in front of him. I mean, just insane.
Yeah, that's the thing. It just seems like no matter what you do against these guys, they're always going to have an answer. So, that's the rough part about it. So, again, I think that's going to be the case for years to come. And at this point, given what the Chiefs have built, I feel like even if one day, Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce, decide to leave, or, that's probably not going to happen at this point. But, I think they're eventually going to be able to find the next Travis Kelce, the next Tyreek Hill. So I think, I just think this trend is going to continue for a long time, as long as Mahomes is under center for them.
Yeah, definitely. Now, Luis, thanks for being on the show. Do you have any other last words that you'd like to tell listeners?
No, man, just, support small market journalism. If you happen to be in a small market yourself and you're not a reporter, just tune into the local news, see what's going on. Anytime you're supporting some of these like more local reporters, you're going to help them, launch their career, and it's going to create a better product for your market at the end of the day. I don't know. I guess that's one thing I'd want to say. Other than that, though, yeah, thanks for having me on, Devin. Really appreciate it.
Of course. Ladies and gentlemen, that was Luis Lopez. You can follow him on Instagram at Luis Lopez Media, right? And then on Twitter, is it still Luis Lopez DA, or is it changed?
It is changed. I also made the switch to Luis Lopez Media. I like to keep it consistent. Gotta make it easy.
There you go. On Twitter at Luis Lopez Media, and on Instagram at Luis Lopez Media. You can follow him there. Check out his content at kyma.com, kyma11.com. He does great stuff there. He's at MMJ. He does sports. He does news. He does it all. He anchors too. I mean, Swiss Army knife of the Yuma, Arizona region.
We're trying. We do what we can.
All right. Thanks for coming on, Luis.
Thanks, Devin. Appreciate it.